Welcome to Norwood Oval, Adelaide.
Welcome to Norwood Oval, Adelaide.
That's Nick Mason. He was a sports commentator for the ABC way back when. So you need to wind your watches back 45 years and probably just adjust for the half-hour time difference in Adelaide as well. Because right here in 1981 on Norwood Oval is where they played the Australian Baseball Championships, which was called the Claxton Shield. So the series gets off to a great start, and a couple of days in, I pitch a game against Queensland and we win that game. So we've got a couple of wins under our belt. But the next day we're playing New South Wales, and they've always been a difficult team to beat. And this particular game is going to be shown on TV. So back in Melbourne, my girlfriend is sitting in front of the TV and she's bringing all the nieces and nephews in, hoping to see me. And of course, I'm sitting on the bench charting all the batters because I'd played the game before. Just as we expected, the game's a really close one, and near the end of the game it is 5-all. It's a really tight game. And one of our guys comes up to bat. His name's Phil Allen, a really good guy and a really good hitter, and he gets a walk.
All far.
Iron inside. Now, Byers might be getting a bit tired.
So he gets up to first base, and now we have a runner on first, so we have a chance to score a run. But you see, there's a problem, because the name Phil Allen and the word run doesn't really match, if you know what I mean.
Sad, but true.
So the coach Dave went, he looks up at first base and he sees Phil Allen, and he realises his capabilities, or lack of. And then he looks around at the bench to see if there's anybody else who can run faster than Phil, and he finds that everybody can. And so he picks out this guy called me, and I run up to first base and replace Phil.
A pinch runner coming in. John Ramsden will come into first base.
Ramsden replacing Allen, running.
John Ramsden, normally a pitcher, but he can scoot.
Meanwhile, back in Melbourne, Florina realises what's going on, and she's screaming out to the kids, "Come back in, John's going to be in the game." So all the kids race back into the lounge room. They sit down, expectantly waiting for me to be in the game. Chris Straw comes up to bat, and he hits it straight back at the pitcher, Mark Byers, who feels it really well. He picks it up and throws it to second base to try and start a double play to get out of the innings. And then an incident that was to reshape my whole life, and as it turns out, my whole face.
Now the most controversial and widely publicised play of the series. The base runner is John Ramsden. The shortstop is Graham Castle.
The ball game would be over.
Double play coming up. There's the first one. And he threw it into the runner and hit Ramsden right in the face. He is hurt.
I'll never forget that moment, and I'll never forget the feeling of that ball hitting me. It was like my head exploded. I just stayed on the ground. I lay on the ground. I didn't say anything because I knew I was a mess. And my orbit bone under my eye had been broken, my cheekbone had been broken, my nose had been broken, and apparently there was enough blood to fill half a swimming pool all over the ground. The game stopped for quite a long time, and eventually they put me on a stretcher and took me off towards Adelaide Hospital. Meanwhile, back in Melbourne, there was a beautiful young lass standing in front of a TV set with tears pouring down her face. And her father very quickly put her in the car and drove her off to Melbourne Airport. And I have no idea how this happened so quickly, but about 3.5 hours later, when they brought me out of wherever they were working on me and up into the I ward, she was sitting there waiting for me in a chair. And that's where she spent the next 16 days. Meanwhile, back at Norwood Oval, the game had gone into extra innings, and it was now the bottom of the 10th.
Now the bottom of the 10th, and Victoria's man on base is Mike Deeble. None out.
He doesn't bunt.
It could be in a double play.
Oh.
Oops, he stole.
He's out.
Oh, he's dropped the ball. And Deeble's coming to third base. Oh, Victoria in an impregnable position now. Now the New South Wales infield, they're playing on or inside the line. Second baseman there, you can see in the top right. He's just standing back. That's Gaynor. First baseman's well inside the line. Shortstop's on the line. Third baseman on the line. If there's a ground ball to the infield, the player's going to be at home.
We're looking for a line drive.
Ground ball to the shortstop. Castle to the plate. Wild pitch, and Victoria's won the game. Victoria wins on a wild throw by the shortstop to the catcher, and Victoria wins with none out in the 10th inning by 6 runs to 5.
Obviously, I never saw the end of the game, but one of the nurses in her own beautiful way tried to describe to me what happened at the end of the game because she'd been watching it on the TV in the other room. The first night was an absolute shocker. I couldn't sleep. I was in a stack of pain. But I remember in the morning a doctor coming in and he said to me, "You can't see me, but I've got a paper in my hand." I said, "What kind of paper?" And he said, "A newspaper, and you're on the front page." And I laughed and I said, "There mustn't have been much happening in Adelaide yesterday." And he said, "There never is." I said, "You can't say that." And he said, "Yes, I can. I'm from Sydney." The very next day was the most important game of the series because we're playing against South Australia, and if we win that game, we clinch the Claxton Shield. There will be no playoff. And we started off really, really poorly and they scored 3 runs early. But then partway through the game, our guys went absolutely nutcase with the bats and we scored 17 runs and finished up winning the game 17-7. It was fantastic. I remember I was listening to the TV. I wasn't allowed to watch it. They still wouldn't let me even take one little eye thing off my eye to have a look. But I was listening and listening and listening, and I could hear individual players, guys that I knew well, screaming and shouting. And I could only just imagine what was going on in the middle of that oval at that time. It was just absolutely wonderful. A couple of hours later, well after visiting hours, there was this great big ruckus in the bottom of the hospital. And I could hear people calling out, "You're not allowed in, you can't just come in when you want to, you just can't do that." It was getting closer, it was going up the stairs, and eventually I realised what it was. It was the whole team that had come into the hospital, barging their way through places they weren't meant to barge their way through, and they brought the shield up into my room. It was just such a great team and a great win that year. A lot of things happened in the next days and weeks and months, and one of them was that it became very, very obvious that I wasn't going to be able to play baseball properly again because I had double vision now when I looked in certain directions, and as a pitcher that was incredibly dangerous. So that was the end of that. And what about the girl that sat faithfully beside me for 16 days in that hospital? Well, later that year, I married her. And she stood beside me faithfully for 39 years until she died in 2020. And Phil Allen, the bloke that I replaced running, well, he may not be able to run that hot, but when it comes to being a teammate, he was an absolute ripper. He was the first one out in the ground there, and he stood beside that stretcher the whole way. In fact, he actually did get a chance to finally run. Are you ready? Here he goes. And that was it. Good on you, Phil. But he faithfully stayed with that stretcher until we were off the ground and I was safely in that ambulance. The only sad thing about Phil really was that, to be perfectly honest, his running never really improved.